All right, so continuing with our landscape, I have these pieces cut out and placed. And I've promised that I will not work on these outside of class. So you can actually see all the components. So now I'm going to quickly review that just by cutting out this bridge portion here. I'm going to first try just selecting the sky using the magic wand with a low tolerance, perhaps too low. A good default is 32 for the magic wand. Oh, I must be on the wrong layer, sure enough. So Command D will deselect for you. There we go. So 32 works pretty well here. Remember, I can hold down Shift to add to my selection as I go. And I can hold down Option to delete from my selection if it goes too far. Now this is a good example because it has all of this little open space here. And I'll show you how I deal with that. First I'll just hit delete and then Command D. And the problem with using the magic wand is it's a very crisp cutout, right? Very sharp edges like we've seen in the other layers. But here we have this tree with sky behind it, and I want to get rid of all that sky. Now if I keep using the magic wand, I could delete little chunks like this, or I can turn off the contiguous option, which means that any pixels that are similar to this, whether they're touching it or not, to this sky color will be selected. Now the problem is, if I do that and then I just hit delete, it will delete all of them, even the ones in the rocks. And I don't want that. So instead, while they're selected, now I can just move to the traditional eraser tool. And I want to make sure my eraser brush is a nice hard brush so I can really control it at this point, and that its opacity is 100% because I am erasing completely away. And then I'll just sweep over the selected areas where the sky is something I want to get rid of. But I'm going to be careful not to go into where the rocks are, because there's lots of places where a very light, close to white value is. Then I can use the spacebar to move over here and get these. Clean up that line a little bit. But notice I am not going to erase any of those. So I just let those go. All right, now I can hit Command D, and you'll see how I've gotten rid of the sky almost everywhere. Little tiny places might not have been caught in the first magic wand selection, so I could do a second round. But it's a little distorted because it's such a crisp outline of each pixel. So we'll learn how to soften that very quickly. Play with coloring and lighting, and then eventually how to add some atmosphere and soften it. Now eventually I might want to get rid of that whole mountain and blend it in. And the easy way to do that is to simply take your eraser now and play with its options. Remember, these tools have multiple options. I'm going to take its opacity down to just under 50%, and I'm going to take the hardness of its edge all the way down to 0 and make it a little bit larger as a brush. And then I can very gently erase out and kind of blend the mountain edge. Now the colors are not going to match yet, and that's okay. I will show you how we get there. But right now I'm just softening that hard edge, because I don't think that edge makes a lot of sense there. And I can do that with the tops of the trees too if I need to. For instance, that one's a little jarring. Just soften it a little bit. Again, organic material is much more forgiving of this than man-made mechanical things. All right. So far, so good. I might want to blend this side of the tree a little bit too. That cutout seems a little a little too strong. And I might decide to crop it eventually a little differently as well. And at this point, I could also even decide to stretch this out. Make it a little bit more dramatic. A little bit bigger in the frame, should I want. That seems to work. And because I did that soft edge, you can see that's still intact. This blending, which is just a low opacity soft edge brush, but it already starts to kind of merge the colors, though I'll do a much better job with my layer adjustments. All right, next. This in the front, this water source. So got to get rid of that sky. Going to turn contiguous back on. The tolerance is pretty open at 32, but since there's a lot of contrast between the color and the value of the sky and the rocks, this should have no problem selecting it cleanly. I could probably use the quick selection tool for this, but it doesn't seem to have the sensitivity of all the jagged edges. And that will be 5 components, 5 puzzle pieces kind of cut out, cleanly put together. But then I wanted to give myself an extra challenge and challenge anyone who wants to take it on to hide a food item in there as a major element. And so even though that didn't make it into my sketch, oh wait, I'll show you one more thing here. So I did that. It selected very cleanly, but look, it left this little buzzy edge. Right? So I'm going to undo it with Command Z. And no matter how much I select, you'll see that it will leave a little white edge, and that's because that photograph has been already digitally retouched a little bit to enhance the contrast at that edge, so it does have a little white glow to sharpen it. So how do I fix that? Well, once you have a selection that's active, in your toolbar you'll see Refine Edge as an option. This is something you have to be very selective about using, but if we click it, we can choose, and this is how I always use it, and I'm going to have it remember the settings I choose. I'm going to shift the edge to the positive territory about 15%, 15 to 20%. And what I'm going to do is simply feather it a few pixels. And you'll see in a preview, it's going to bite in and basically do what a soft brush does. And I can make the radius a few pixels as well, between 3 and 5 pixels. Then I say OK, because we're working at 350 pixels per inch. So 3 to 5 pixels is not a huge range. And then you hit OK, and it takes a little while to process it. But then it will change your selection. So now my selection looks to be biting in underneath that little white halo that it was avoiding before. But not only is it biting in, it's going to softly gradate up to that edge now. So when I hit delete, you'll see it just has a soft glow. And then if I hit delete again, it will keep biting away at that soft glow with a softer edge transition. Now, when you get to kind of deep V's like this, it's not going to be able to take care of those. And that's when you just go to your brush tool directly. And I can keep it at a fairly high opacity and a pretty sharp edge, but not 100% hardness. So I'm at 50%. And then I can just get those last little remnants myself. And we're not going for absolute perfection of every pixel here. We have to zoom in enough to see the details. And unfortunately, this reference just isn't as sharp as the rest. I think it's because I blew it up so much. But it's also because in the photograph, this is out of focus, whereas the foreground is more sharp and in focus. So that's going to be something I play with my texture pools. But I do like how the bridge kind of works there. And maybe I want to bring the bridge in more. And how do you do that? Well, I can simply take the opacity down so I can see through the layer on top. I can take my lasso and I can just roughly cut around where I want the bridge to show. Actually, I think I want that whole valley behind to show. That's what I love about organic material. Now, instead of just deleting it from this layer, I'm going to take it to 100%. What I'm going to do is say select inverse. So that will select everything else in that layer, except that patch. And then I duplicate it, Command J. And then I turn off the layer behind, and it shows me, okay, so that's what it looks like behind there. That's kind of nice. Maybe I want to do that there as well. So again, take the opacity down. Now we're making kind of fine distinctions. That will show that little house back there, little ruin. Do a rough cutout, so I can always refine it after, just using the lasso tool. Say select, well, first put it to 50%, or from 50% back to 100%. And now I kind of know what I want, so I'm going to add to my selection. I want to get rid of all of that. Then select inverse, so it selects everything except for that patch, and then duplicate, Command J, and turn off the layer behind. Yeah, and that's kind of working for the perspective and everything I have in mind. So that kind of sets the scale. Okay, now how do I add in a food element? Well, I'm thinking I'm going to use that kind of crumbled chocolate, this one right over here. The brownie will be for my vertical format if I ever do that. And because these are very similar pixels, very similar colors, no automatic selection tool is going to work as well as just the eraser. So I'm going to make its size a little bigger. It's at 50% hardness, but 100 and about 100% opacity. And it's pressure sensitive to scale. And now this is where I'll trim it. And what's nice again about organic material like these rocks, especially because it's slightly less in focus than the bridge, I don't need to be perfectly exact. In fact, I can even cut into the rock a little bit and shape it to my own tastes. And you'll notice the big color difference. The bridge is in grays and greens, mostly cool tones, whereas these foreground rocks are very, very warm. Bright orange and red. And one of my favorite adjustment tools we'll learn to use is color balance, where you actually aren't changing the highlights or the shadows in terms of how light or dark they are. You're simply changing the tones in terms of their color temperature, how warm or cool they are. It's also my favorite photo retouching adjustment. We're in a room right now at Northeast Lakeview College that is all lit with fluorescent lamps that give kind of a yellowish glow to everything. So if I was to photograph something in here, I have to adjust the color to move that really yellowish color balance that's really warm to something a little cooler. All right. So now we've got that nicely cut out. Now a new element. So how do I bring in a new element? I drag and drop. It will come in on top as a smart layer. I'm going to size it roughly. put this in the